Hi, my name is Roman Koch. I will be presenting on ancient Greece and its art. And as we start, I want to show these two photos. They were created by a man by the name of Nemeth Adam. His website is in the bottom right corner. It's virtualreconstruction.com. So if you want to check out more of his work, you can go there. So what this artist does is he recreates ancient scenes and settings, but what they would have looked like in their day. So here we get to see these two settings, which are from ancient Greece. If you go visit them in person, which you can today, but you would find them broken up, missing much of their structure, in shambles. So because of this artist's work, we can see what they would look like in their time. And here we see that they are much more lifeful, much more vibrant, have much more color to them. And this is to say that ancient Greece and its architecture and art was much more full of life. Moving on to my artifact, which is the Doryphoros, and I want to talk about the story of how MIA in Minneapolis came to obtain this artifact. So in 1986, they acquired it from an art dealer by the name of Eli Borowski. So here's the interesting thing is earlier in that year, in 1986, the artifact was actually in Germany. And while it was in Germany, the Italian government tried to claim that the artifact was actually stolen from an archaeological site in Stabe in 1976. The German government actually denied their claim, and later in that year, it would be imported into the U.S. And that's where MIA, or when MIA came to acquire it. So the interesting thing is, in March 2022, the Italian court ruled that MIA was actually irregularly in possession of the sculpture, which is a fancy way of saying they were in possession of it illegally and that they should return it. MIA does not have any plans to return it because they don't believe that the Italian court has any basis for their claims, and they believe that they have come in possession of it uh, in legal ways. Doryphoros actually means spear bearer. So I would have never guessed that because when I was there in person looking at it, I noticed that it's missing its left arm. And apparently, in this left arm would have been the spear. Here's something I find absolutely shocking is that this Doryphoros is actually considered one of the best preserved. Um, the reason I find this so shocking is not only because it's missing its left forearm, but it's missing fingers on its right hand. It's cracked and broken all over, and it just looks like it's in poor condition. So it's amazing that this is considered one of the best preserved in the world. I don't think it has anything or to say anything to say on the excellent condition of this one, but rather that the poor condition of the other ones in the world. Um, this is again a recreation of the original. The original and originals were created in 440 BC in ancient Greece, but later on in the Roman Empire, the Romans would smelt them down because the originals were made in bronze, which was a pricey material, which still is a pricey material. But then the Romans recreated them because they actually admired these original sculptures, and in the recreation they made them out of marble, and that's why most of the Dora forests that we look at today are made out of marble. Moving on, I want to go to the artist that created it, originally created it in ancient Greece. His name was Polykleitos. And the interesting thing about Polykleitos was not only that he was one of the top sculptors in ancient Greece, but also that he wrote a book called the Canon of Polykleitos. And this book was about the perfect body proportions. And Polykleitos, he actually had a idealized male body shape, and he even had mathematics backing up his claim of his idealized male body shape. Polykleitos definitely spearheaded the movement for the standard for perfection when it comes to the male body and aesthetics. But he was not the only one that contributed to this idealized male body shape. In ancient Greece, in Olympia, we had the Olympic Games, and the Olympic Games, would make and lead men to compete against each other in great ways. But in order to win these competitions, you would have to be athletic, you would have to be fast, you would have to be strong. And men trained for these games. And the winners actually got statues made out of them. And these statues were placed in Olympia and in their hometowns. So people got to see these statues and see these men that were held up on a pedestal, and they would idealize them and idealize their bodies because these are the bodies that won the games. I also want to go to the fact that his views on beauty have contributed to our modern standards on beauty, and these standards have stood for thousands of years. Its importance in history. Uh, Polykleitos was definitely one of the biggest contributors to this, but he only worked on sculptures. He was not an architect. But what his uh, I guess, sculptures and his art showed was the beautiful beauty and symmetry and balance and proportion. And this was central to the Greeks' understanding of beauty. And it showed what the Greeks were all about, order and beauty. And what the Greeks later did was use the same mindset in the creation of the architecture. And Polykleitos' son actually was an architect and would go and contribute to Greek architecture with this mindset. Why is this important in history? Again, um, I want to return to the fact that most of our modern day architecture is actually based off the Roman Empire architecture, and the Romans were heavily influenced by ancient Greece. So again, this is how it's or why it's really important in history. I have a question here that I want to ask and then answer, and is was the ancient Greek view of beauty a shallow and warped view? So here in the middle we have Aphrodite, and she was a god of beauty, and people would pray for her for certain things about whether it be about sex, marriage, fertility, pleasure, and was this what the Greeks cared about? Just aesthetics and having more sex and obtaining more pleasure? Was it a very shallow view of beauty? And interesting thing is, I want to bring up my point in saying this, that here are a lot of images, the ones both two to the right and two to the left of these men, and these are all AI generated. And if you ask AI to create images for you of Greek men, ancient Greek men, this is what they create for you. And if you notice something, they all have beards. And the original sculpture, the Doryphoros, does not have a beard. So it's an interesting question comes up. Why is that? And if you look at the top right corner, even Zeus on a coin from ancient Greece had a beard. So why doesn't Doryphoros have a beard? And I'll get to that in a second, but the reason that all these images have beards is because the famous men, whether it be Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, they all had long beards, and their long beards symbolized their wisdom and intellectual power. Um, so the reason that they don't have beards, Doryphorus doesn't have a beard, that is because later on, Alexander the Great would order his men to shave off their beards before battles, and this is because he didn't want their men getting grabbed by the beards and it being a disadvantage for them. And Alexander the Great's standard for his men would actually become the normal standard for all men in that time. So later Greek, ancient Greece, around 330 and on, would actually get rid of the standard of all having ungroomed beards and long beards. And then Romans would actually uh, obtain this standard of being well groomed, and the standard would last for around 400 years on after Alexander the Great. Why is it significant to our course? This is significant to our course for a few reasons, but I want to say the biggest reason is because the men's idealized body was not for just looking pretty, as a lot of guys in modern contemporary day idealize male bodies. They look at themselves in the mirror. They want to work out. They just want to have the look. Uh, to them, it was being physically fit and being ready to battle and fight for what they loved and valued the most anytime they needed to. And here are a few stories and proofs of this. We have Paris from the Iliad, and if we look at Paris from the Iliad and read about him, we see that Paris is mocked and he's laughed at and he's put up as a character that's a coward and someone that you should not want to be like. And the Iliad was written by Homer in ancient Greece, even earlier than 500 BC. So this was a to say that ancient Greece men did not like cowardness and looked down upon cowards. I mean, who has ever looked up to cowards? But my main point is to say that uh, in the character of Paris, this gets brought out and shown more. We also see in the resistance against the Persians, both in 490 BC and 479 BC, that these individualistic Greek states all actually came together. And this was not normative. Actually, Greek states some Greek states actually hated each other, but they came together because they valued their sovereignty and their individualism. And these Greek men, they all came together and they defeated the Persians. And there's actually a famous story in the 479 BC invasion of the Persians that their leader, Xerxes, was on a hilltop and he was watching his men battle against the Greeks. And he wanted to be on the hill because he wanted to watch his men, destroy the Greeks, and then he would reward his men accordingly to how well they fought for him. But he was sadly mistaken and brought down. And when he seen his men suffer heavy losses and actually be defeated, and this is to say that the Greek men stood uh, and fought with bravery and honor, even though they were outnumbered. And this is because all of their men were physically built, or most of their men would have been physically built, because this is the standard that was put on their men. Um, Now moving on to the story of 300 Spartans, and they were called by the name of equals, and this was a story about 300 men that stood bravely against a huge oncoming army of Persians. And the interesting thing about these 300 men is that they knew that they would be defeated. They actually knew they had no chance of standing against the Persians, but yet they stood in the gap, so to say, and fought valiantly. Yeah, they only were defeated quickly. I wouldn't say quickly, I'm sorry. They actually stood for 2 days in battling against the Persians, which were a much bigger force, which just shows the sheer glorious might of these 300 men, that they could stand against a much bigger army for 2 whole days. And again, they were only defeated because of a local trader who showed the Persians another way around them. So the Persians found a way around the Spartan men and came behind them, flanked them, and killed them all. Um, and again, I say all this to say that the Greek men were valiant men. They were men that fought bravely, um, and stood on their sovereignty and wanted to uh, value their homes and their families, and they would not accept submission to Persia as a way of life. So again, they were not just pretty boys worried about their looks, but rather men that stood on certain principles and were ready to die for them. This is my presentation on the Doryphoros and what it says about ancient Greece and its art, and I thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.